The washing clean of the world of man is very difficult because the whole world's been wrapped up in this version of man's law. It is allowed to exist. It is like a dog collar for those that have not entered into spirituality. But the legal system definitely controls those who are interested or concerned in being legal, and therefore it's there for the purpose of controlling those who have not come to spirituality and truth. Now, when we read, we're going to read a scripture very important, which is basically Hebrews 9, verse 14. Hebrews 9 and 14 reads, "How much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot," that's mark or blemish, he had no mark, no blemish, no birthmark, not in the legal sense, he held no legal condition from the Roman civil system, "purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God." We'll go over that one more time. It says, "How much more shall the blood of Christ," remember he canceled out all the debt, Colossians 2, 13 to 15. He canceled out the certificate of debt. He canceled out legal indebtedness. "Who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God. Purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God." Well, what's a dead work? Well, in the legal system, dead works would be related to the body corporate. So it's in many places, they'll even name the province or the territory, and they will state, even in Canada, here in Ontario, it will call the province of Ontario, it'll have a system called Ontario Works. But Ontario is a body corporate entity, so it's a dead works. Now, it says in Scripture for us to purge ourselves from dead works because we're supposed to be in the living, not in the dead. That's why God will judge the living and the dead. So the big question is, which side have you elected to be in? Now, you can't have both. You can't be in both because one will take over. One has a jurisdiction the minute you've entered into it and have acted in surety position for it. So in the legal system, you must be a surety for it because it couldn't exist without you suretying it. But in the spiritual sense, you've been purchased. So you are not of your own. You're owned by the Creator and was purchased by His Son. Therefore, you could never be in the legal system. And even though you may deceive yourself into attempting it and trying to have two separate loyalties, it will not work, as was stated in Matthew 6, verse 24. You cannot serve two masters. So you can't serve the spiritual master and his son Jesus Christ and serve a legal master, which is what the registrars register title in fiction on. That's why even in their own letters, writing back to people who've inquired about what the registrars do in these legal states and provinces, they will clearly state in their letters that they do not register people, they register events. But what they're really telling you is they register a legal fiction, because that's all they have the capability of registering. So it's on an attempt to mix the natural with the unnatural and the artificial, and therefore why the statement of birth record the parents fill out is such a problematic document is because it has both what is the property of God and what is natural, what is given, which is a fact, which is contrary to fiction. So it's not one and the same. And therefore, when we're looking into definitions dealing with what is defined as fiction, it will tell us clearly how the world of fiction operates. So we're going to go to the world of fiction in definition in the Oxford Dictionary. And the Oxford Dictionary, I have a 20 volume set, so just, it's quite a big volume set. You're going to see a lot more usage of this because I've used to work out of a 2 volume concise set, which was everything comprised of the 20 in 2 volumes. Usually required me to use not only reading glasses, but also a magnifying glass on top of it, just so I could get into the depth of the English language to see how it is used. When we go to fiction, there's a couple very key things that will show up under fiction. First thing is Latin. It says to fashion or form. We've already gone through that. Then it says see feign. Now we know feign is not a good word because it was spoken of in the book of Peter that says they will make merchandise out of you, talking about the legal civil system that he was surrounded with, even though he had been brought to the truth of God. This basically brought about an understanding that the civil system would make commercial merchandise out of you by feigned words, Peter said. To feign. Okay, so it's to merchandise, to legalize, to bring into the world of make-believe and imagination of men and those under the wicked one, Satan, who turns you into a servant of evil by your own consent. So it starts off, it says, fiction. It has the word finger, which is quite interesting because it does relate to the word finger, because we know people who are informants finger someone. So it's not out of the ordinary that the parents who fill out the registrations to bring someone into the legal system, at least in theory, based on a hearsay document, they actually are informants fingering the child who is innocent without cause, and then placing a falsehood name of accusation on them. So who better to do the informing than the parents who finger the child to fashion them according to the world that they are part of. Then you go down definitions that come up. It says the action of fashioning or imitating. It goes further. It says feigning, counterfeiting, deceit, dissimulation, pretense. Further, that which or something that is imaginatively invented, feigned existence, event, or state of things, invention as opposed to fact. So on the statement of birth records, the parents fill in, there's 2 things going on. There's fact and there's a fictitious event or fiction. So when the state is saying we do not register people, well, how could a legal system register people when it can only register a fictitious title? Because that's the only authority it has the ability to do. It can only walk on the premise of a lie. It cannot really bring about anything that could actually affect truth. In fact, Latin maxims clearly stated that where truth is, what is given, something that's a given or a fact, where truth is, fiction of law does not exist. So if we looked at the statement of birth record the parents fill out, you would only see the truth of the God-given name on there, and the fiction would be canceled or erased. But they leave it on there as an error to induce someone to take on that error, because the fiction world works in error with the lawyers. So they're professional error promoters, not people promoting anything to do with being heirs of truth of God. So we go further down. There's a couple other definitions we'll get in here. It states, there's a couple just renderings. It says it is a supposition known to be at variance with fact. Now we know the works of the flesh stated that variances were parts of the works of the flesh because they were something that went away from truth. So when you read in the book of Galatians dealing with the works of the flesh, this concept of fiction legal title, a variance, it's a variance away from truth, is in there on the statement or the accusation that will induce someone to believe that something which is false is true. But the actual certificates that are issued do not really clearly define truth and fiction. They will be ambiguous and unclear, and that's why always the name on the docket at any court building will always be ambiguous and unclear, because they're relying on someone walking in just to say they're the surety for the version of the name that occurs on the security instrument that matches that. They know there is basically a need for someone to be deceived to actually verify, so they can be recorded, they can be fingerprinted, they can have their pictures taken to verify that they're suretying the fiction. Without someone's consent coming in there to do this, it would never work. So we go further down in just plain statements that are used. What's great about the Oxford 20-volume set, it has actually many references on how words are used. One of them states under fiction, it says, "It is a certain rule that a fiction of law shall never be contradicted, so as to defeat the end for which it was invented. But for every other purpose it may be contradicted." So when truth gets in and someone's waking up to truth, then it's a contradiction. But when someone walks in there playing in the fiction and thinking they're going to defeat the action while they're in there, that's a ridiculous concept, because the legal surname means a debtor, a debtor. So the purpose it was put in place for commerce was to make someone who was indebted to a legal system who was responsible to pay for the legal title of commerce they were carrying. It placed the burden on them to be responsible for what they did in legal commerce and legal title. The last reference in here, it says, yes, I'm sorry, that is the one. So we'll read it one more time just to be certain that we've got the gist of this. It says, "It is a certain rule that a fiction of law shall never be contradicted." So it stays in place for those who actually utilize it under the rule of law, man's positive law, that is separate from God's law. Someone who's walking into a lienable position of debt versus being unalienable under God. So it says, "It is certain that the rule that a fiction of law shall never be contradicted, so as to defeat the end for which it was invented." Now we're into the fiction, of course, under invention, "but for every other purpose it may be contradicted." So, unfortunately, people have been deceived through a legal system surrounding them. Lawyers are professional fictionalists. They promote legal fiction. I'm going to call it science legal fiction, because it is a false science of something that is not real. And that's why there are so many laws and so many things that occur in the world of man's operation of government, because those things would never exist in reality under God. And people have unfortunately conformed themselves to a satanic, fictitious liability world that they did not have to enter. We have the ability to end this, but you cannot end your liability while you're still willing to continue to participate in benefits and privileges that are associated with it. You cannot end or frustrate the contract without conscience, which is a clause that is there that negates bad behavior to enter into something immoral and wrong and a lie. So in order to be involved, you have to violate good conscience, knowledge of God. And what did it say in Scripture? "My people will be destroyed due to lack of knowledge."